Yeah.
All right.
Well,
We are live.
We're live.
We're live.
All
We are
right.
live.
This is episode 26, 27.
Something like that.
We're seasoned pros at this point. The Hunt for Success podcast. Cody Steinman, Ryan McCracken. Today we got Tom Griffith. Second time.
Right?
Super excited. Two-timer.
Two-timer. I'm pretty excited to actually be in a more elite club now.
Yes.
It's, travel status matters to me, so I love being in the club that's a two-timer.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very small club so far.
I love that.
If you haven't yet, please visit our GoFundMe page. We'll post a link in here. It's something we're going to be doing until the end of September for the Children's Justice League.
Children's Justice Center.
Excuse me. I got to stop doing that. It's like a superhero movie. No, Children's Justice Center. Tony Golick was on our podcast a couple episodes ago. Really important fundraiser for us. So if you're listening, jump on there. Go listen to that episode. Help us raise some funds for the Children's Justice Center. YouTube, iTunes, Facebook, the Hunt for Success podcast. Jump on there, follow, leave comments. Tell us what you
Instagram.
think.
The Hunt for Success podcast.
Tom Griffith, you're looking great.
Appreciate that.
You know, cufflinks. Cufflinks are starting to make a comeback.
They never left for me.
I don't think they ever left, really.
Right. So for me, I just to roll some French cuffs
Looks good.
is literally the thing for me.
Yes.
And I don't know why. I've always liked that, but I like I have a huge problem with shirts because I'm built odd. So I usually have to. Well, I enjoy them more when they're tailored, custom. So I always want the cufflink.
What do you think about dress code in a business setting?
So I would tell you I'm mellowing on that a little bit. And I was a huge stickler, and my rule was always dress the next step above your contact or prospect that you're talking to. Always one step above. At this point, maybe I've just reached the point to where I just want to be comfortable, and frankly, I don't care. And so, for me, I enjoy, depending on the weather, I always like a nice shirt, but plain old jeans is fine with that. And I think I shared last time we were together, my history was a shoe dog, so I love
That's right.
fun shoes, good shoes. So jeans don't matter. I don't need to spend on jeans for me, but I do like fun shirts, and I do like fun jackets. So for me, I don't do a tie much anymore. I was telling Ryan earlier, I almost wore a tie today in his honor, so I'm glad that.
Well, it's 1,000 degrees outside.
Yeah, give or take. So that's it for me. But I did want to just I actually had conversation about coming to this event and how I would appear here and what I would be wearing, because I shared with Ryan earlier, I think I put pants on today for the first time in 3 months, but I almost came in shorts.
You should have. Well, Ryan and I suited and booted every day. So I try to use this platform to not be. But Todd Duncan said this, and it really changed the way I look at my dress code at work, and it's you never know who you're going to meet.
Right.
It could change your life forever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's those days where I fail when I look at my closet and I put jeans and just a dress shirt on. Those are the days I run into people that unexpectedly that I should have been dressed for.
Correct.
So that's my theory. I'm excited because go ahead, Ryan.
What about vice versa, though? You never know, like the day that you throw on your jeans and your cowboy boots and a T-shirt, that you don't run into a client. I got that one client review that in the review, he said, I liked him. He wore cowboy boots. So the reverse can be said, but I don't disagree.
It comes back to what we were talking about with Pat Stone about polarizing yourself,
Yeah,
right?
that's it exactly.
Is if you dress business professional, you're not going to upset anybody and you're not going to totally impress everybody. But maybe if you do decide, I'm going to wear my cowboy boots with my suit every day, you might polarize some people, but then there's the percentage of those you'll gain more respect from.
I agree with that. Frankly, and I think for me where this all started is I still function under the operating statement of casualness leads to casualty, right? That's so
Casualness leads to casualty?
correct. So in the business environment, I'm still aware of what I wear. And that's how I ended up here, literally in the conversation with my wife. I was hemming and hawing. Should I just wear my shorts? And she finally said, you need to feel your best. So go dress to feel your best. And that's
Absolutely.
still true for me.
Absolutely.
Of casualness leads to casualty.
You know, and that's interesting you say that because I normally wear a sports coat, but it's really hot outside. But I normally like to wear like a concert T-shirt or a band I like on the podcast because for me, when I do put on my suit and I go to work, I start off the day with a success. I put myself in the business mindset. And when I come on the podcast, I like to not be in that business mindset anymore. I like to be my podcast mindset. So it's almost like Mr. Rogers, right? You show up. Was that the landscapers? Good timing.
Yeah, that's.
Did they not read the Quiet Please podcast going on?
I mean, is he
That is
actually
loud.
in the building with that thing?
I know.
That's.
All right, so no, let's not take a time. I don't want to use that pause button.
All right.
We'll just let everybody enjoy the hum.
What's really cool, it'll go away. What's really cool is that you are prepared. You have stuff you want to talk about today.
Well, I knew as a two-timer,
Yeah.
I knew there would be some rambling conversation. So again, to not be casual, I wanted to at least show up with all my stuff.
Well, I have one topic.
Let's
So
do it.
we can do my topic or we can go straight into your topic. Your topic looks a lot more exciting. What do you want to do?
Hey, you start. Whatever.
All right, I'll start.
You know, we'll talk about the evolution of things. I have had quite a bit of transition in my own life since I was here. So what's on your
Let's
mind?
get all into that. But there's something that I've learned from my interactions with you and a small list of other people that I'm discovering is really important in business and personal development, especially when you start working with other people. And that's being a champion for other people. When I call you up, and it's not very often, but I call you up to talk to you about coming on the show or doing a project with us, the enthusiasm you have for Ryan and I in our business and our podcast is extremely motivating. And when you say things like, I'm a fan of yours, I support what you're doing, that is more powerful than almost any other type of motivation for this project, right? To know that there's people out there that we have a ton of respect for and hopefully someday can be at the same level of success that champion us. And so when I'm working with other people, that's been at the forefront of my mind this last couple of weeks is how can I be a champion of what this person's doing?
Right.
Because that carries so much power and can totally transform someone's motivation or outlook on whatever project they're working on.
That's so valuable that you would even make that comment. I am a huge fan. But I think that's one of those things as well, Cody, in my life these days. It's so easy for all of us to be wallpaper. It's so easy to be lost in what's going on. And so I think it's always important to affirm what you appreciate. And actually that has a lot to do with what I'm trying to do for myself, is I want to focus on those things that I appreciate and that I feel good about. Because otherwise the alternative is you're focused on things you don't want. But I believe that the edification, validation, and a whole bunch of other shuns are things that we should all focus more on these days. So that's a really cool comment.
Well, and I think it's one of those tools that I didn't realize you have. Yeah, help yourself. They're there for you. And almost the opposite's true, right? If somebody's sharing something with you that might be important to you, and you're kind of half listening, and you run through it, you could devastate what they're trying to do because maybe they're looking for that confirmation that this person thinks is important. Then I start looking at, man, did I ignore what this person said? Or, a great example would be your wife, right? My wife said date nights are important. And she's like, we haven't had a date night in a while. I'm like, what are you talking about? We had one last month. She goes, no, it was 9 months ago. Hey, all right.
Not keeping track or anything here.
It seems like yesterday.
Yeah, but just being a champion for her even,
Right.
And by not paying attention or going too fast, or Carla, our corporate trainer, has been here this week, and she'll be talking to me, and I just was honest with her. I said, the brain is not capable of multitasking, So while you're talking to me, I'm doing a complicated math formula in my head about this. So I can get in about 80% of what you're saying, but keep going.
Right. Full disclosure.
Yeah. So yeah. But anyways, I'm going to write that in my business plan, talk about it with my coach about how I can be a champion for people that I surround myself with. So, and one of them's you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's so worthy today more than ever. People are isolated. So your willingness to extend to them, to literally say, in the most human way, I see you, I hear you, I value you, is almost the antithesis of what society is now.
I've heard you say that before, and I just got goosebumps because our society is facing some major issues right now. Suicide is, I think, at an all-time high or has increased significantly this year. And I saw a study that talks about isolation and not having, relying on social media for your interactions with people and not being able to have a true conversation with somebody, and how the statistics are showing that's leading to an increase in suicide. So it's goes way beyond just helping somebody be motivated for a goal, but we're human.
Right.
And people need that. And without those interactions like we're doing right now, it can create a sense of loneliness that can be devastating.
Yeah, and the social media piece I think is huge to think about, because people, everybody's putting out their best life on social media, and it can really make some people feel real bad about their lives. Me personally, I take it with a grain of salt. I know that just because that mom posted that picture of her kids smiling in the back seat, that probably the 15 minutes prior to that was a blowout argument trying to just get the seatbelt buckled. But yeah,
I think a great social media experiment, maybe, and I'm just articulating this for the first time, but I agree with what you're saying. Everybody posts their best. So it would be really cool if we just had hashtag dumpster fire.
That's a great idea.
well,
just post your absolute worst.
some people do post their worst, but I feel like they're just attention seekers in the other light.
I get that too.
Well,
So-
and a like on your picture of your vacation is not the same as somebody listening and truly being interested.
right.
And, it just doesn't fill the bucket the same way.
No,
But
it doesn't.
But yeah, not a super fun topic. But so what's going on in your world? Last time we talked, you were starting a new venture. So where are you at? What's going on?
And by the way, I clarified the date of when I was here last, and it felt longer. But there has been a great deal, and for me, 2018 and specifically May was a major milestone. And that milestone caused me to do some different things, as well as January. January was my 55th birthday. And the only reason I would say that is that was also the realization, as I'd shared on this podcast and with other people before, I started out this work life of mine at age 15. And so that meant when I turned 55, I realized I'm power sliding into the end of my first 40 years of doing this. And May was actually I don't know the exact day, but I know that it was May when I started my first endeavor at 15. And I realized that I am in a point of transition from two very distinct 20-year blocks of my life. Age 15 to 35 was a 20-year block of a guy, in the dignity of retrospect now, to look back and to say, running hard, trying to find external validation to deal with pain and whatever. That was the first 35 years, or the first 20 years. And the subsequent 20 years, 35 to 55, included a little bit more normalcy for me, family. I at 35 years of age, I was pretty sure I was going to be a curmudgeon and old and alone, because I had literally destroyed every valuable relationship I had up until that point. But family came, but it was still defined as an era of, bottom left to upper right, challenge yourself, what's possible, this notion of limitation and removing obstacles and growth and, all those things. And so what happened since I was here last, I whipped up in my own kitchen, my own batch of my Kool-Aid. And I said, what am I going to do now?
Well, I can't let you go on without asking, how did you destroy all your relationships?
Well,
And we don't have to talk about it. We normally do this before the podcast.
Sure.
For those that don't know, we normally say we were busy today, but we normally say, what, is there anything that's off limits? So we don't have to talk about it. But I look back at there's been relationships that I've ruined, and there becomes a sense of maturity where you look back and you go, I'm definitely not the person I was back then. If I was, I wouldn't be growing. But maybe I destroyed that relationship, and so. But that was a pretty big statement, so I
Sure.
couldn't let you go.
That's okay. And at this point, I'm good to talk about it. But what I learned early on, very small, single digits. I was raised in an environment that wasn't stable, that was filled with fear. For me, I think for my dad too. I had some significant upset with my dad. I thought that love was violent and loud, and confusing, and that I always had to look for stability. So that was my testimony young. And so that caused me to, in essence, isolate from my family early. I left. That's why I started out at 15. I was like, I gotta be out of this. And that, but as I would feel a relationship getting close, then I would be angry and loud and cause a great deal of pain. And because I thought that was normal.
Yeah.
And it left me, extraordinarily isolated at age 35, 36, 37 years of age. It was a very difficult time for me because I was at the end of the first 20 years that had left me, in essence, a shell, where I had a bunch of stuff, but I had zero satisfaction. I had zero fulfillment. And it took me another 20 years, to figure out how to stop. And I think that it's valuable in the story. I appreciate that you would ask. And at this point, I do live my life in a way that for my friends, for people, for my clients, but for people, my book, I think everybody's book contains warnings and examples, and so sometimes people will say to me, whether it's as we're getting closer in a working relationship or even in a almost prospecting sort of situation, Cody, they'll say to me, well, you don't understand my problem. You don't know what it's like to be me. And I feel like, and what I've just begun to articulate is, I'm not so sure. Give me a try.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. This is my story. And, I lost a lot of battles, and I sought external fulfillment in a lot of things. And so anyway.
It's almost more important for people like yourself to share those stories, because when we watch or read books or are looking towards motivational speakers or business development, it's almost like they're in a fantasy world. And by hearing their struggles, and Todd Duncan's a great example of it. He's very open with the struggles he's had. It almost makes him a real person. And I'm more open to taking his opinion now. So
yeah, people are people.
Right?
Yeah.
It's, and that's important, I think, for most people. I mean, I've realized that even as that, we talked about a new project starting, and I'm fine to, talk about the evolution of that, but I've realized the distillation of my life now, the only way that I can say I am extremely confident in my ability to help people feel confident about their future, because my past was my past, same as everybody has a past. But I think it's important that we all realize that this notion that what we're tying all together this conversation you were starting with, the isolation and social media and the excellence and the example that we have to hold ourselves up to is killing us because our lives are filled with dumpster fires. There's calamity everywhere, and that's part of the condition. Yet we're comparing to ideals, and each time we end up saying, "Oh, well, then clearly I suck."
Yeah.
But see, I want to help people let go of that notion and begin to find their way to thrive in their current condition. It's extraordinarily valuable.
All right. Well, I didn't mean to interrupt and take us down a
You're good.
path there, but so where are we at now? So you've been through your 2 time blocks or 2 life blocks. May you had a realization we're entering a new one.
Yeah, and early in the year, a little bit before May, I did something extraordinary for me. I had some ideas as I began to rethink. And really, I think, Cody, the word for me is to refine my thinking around what will I do in this last 20-year block. I'm not, I am also, like some of your other guests, I am not a believer in the notion of an absolute finite retirement date and everything changes on that day. I think that's complete fallacy in my world. So we will do something, and for me, I'm 55. I mean, there's a strong likelihood I will do something until I'm 75. What will that be? And so I had some ideas, and I know that the mantle I carry around is when I engage with people in a beyond superficial level, when they say to me, "Tom, I'm here and I want to get to here and I think you can help me." When I speak, people say, "That mattered to me in the way that you said it." And that's really, that's a mantle that I guess it's my duty to carry that right now until it's not. And so I actually made a list of a group of people that I wanted to ask them some questions about myself. And so I surveyed a nucleic group, people that
Nucleic?
a nuclear group. They were all centered around me, right? These were great relationships, oldest relationships, business, personal, mentoring or teacher relationships. And I asked them 6 questions because I wanted to have a chance to see me through other people's eyes. So I literally just made a little Google survey form, and I sent them an email. And I said, "I have finished 40 years. 2 20-year blocks, and as I enter this next one, I want to ask you some questions. I want your feedback." And I asked them questions like, personally, what's my strength? Professionally, what's my strength? What value do you get from connecting with me?
And were these multiple choice, or were they?
They were an open, you fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Text. So I didn't presuppose any of it. And I also told them, I'm not collecting your email. I don't know it's from you. So you can be honest. And, while it wasn't revolutionary, meaning it didn't turn my world upside down, but what I did get a lot of feedback from, or what I got a quantity of feedback was, you should probably consider speaking. Maybe you should speak. Perhaps you should be a speaker. Do you realize you're a speaker? And I just thought, okay, that makes total sense to me. But the last question that was also very resonant, the last question was, what is it that you think is me that I'm not taking advantage of? What do you see that I should really carry forward? And it was in that story that people said, you need to tell your story. People need to understand your story, because that's powerful.
And is your story something you haven't shared? Like in your speakings and?
Yeah, so I have of late, but out of insecurity for many, many years, and frankly, I had such significant brokenness with my dad that I literally made up stories to deal with the pain. And psychologically, that's just called denial, right? Mm-hmm. So he died when I was 50. But I didn't tell the story out of insecurity to say, my daddy liked to drink, and when he was drunk, he wasn't happy. He was mean, and I was the object of his anger. And that messed me up, right? So because when I was like every middle schooler, I didn't feel good about myself. It was hard. I was awkward. I was built like this, just all those things, right? I was never what I thought was worthy. I always felt like I'm damaged goods.
Yeah,
And so-
you can see, Tom, a physical discomfort when you bring it up.
It still hurts,
Yeah.
right? There's just like, God, I wish it would have been different.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important that people just realize I'm extraordinarily compassionate for the struggle of the person that says, I feel vulnerable here, because I spent a lot of years in that capacity. And in order to make myself feel good, I would push. I would find ways I could win, because I wasn't an athlete. I didn't compete and win that way. I didn't have a successful family, so I didn't compete and win that way. As I shared with you before, I went to work in a sales environment. I went to the street. I didn't go to school. I did well academically, but I realized I could win in business.
Yeah.
And so
In sales.
specifically sales. So that was it for me. But that was part of the story and part of the pain that's led to, broken relationships and a lot of brokenness, and where I end up. I'm not trying to dwell here, Cody, but I'm fine to tell the story where
Yeah.
I ended up running and creating wreckage for a generation of my life because of a fairly isolated event. I mean, my dad quit drinking by the time I was 10, but it was done by that time. For me, it was over.
Yeah.
I had erected a set of beliefs around stability and how I had to find that myself, that I could never let that in. Or I could never let someone in to challenge that, because it was only me. Even my mother would not protect me.
Do you think if you would have had somebody there when you were in your later teens to help you deal with that it wouldn't have had such a prolonged effect?
Potentially. And I do think sometimes now, and I try and not go too far down the road of saying, my God, what would have been like if it was different, if he was different? What
Yeah.
would my life have been like? Because that can really get damaging. I actually feel very fortunate now.
I'm sorry, but is it damaging because you start to have pity on yourself, or you start to use that as an excuse of why you're not?
Delusion, denial, excuses, instead of just this clear admission of the obvious truth for me is that was a difficult time, but that's also the DNA of who I am now. And so I have learned that some of those tendencies and behaviors and psychological beliefs that I architected have served me pretty well too.
I would say so, for sure.
So I don't want to just jump down the path of saying, woe is me. I don't believe that at all. But I do believe that those beliefs allow me to confidently look anybody in the eye and say, I understand that you're not confident about your future, and I can help you. That's it.
Because it makes up your character. And so there's good things from every situation, whether it was a good situation or a bad situation. There's good and bad results that come from that. And so be able to pull the good parts of the development of your character from a bad situation and then work on the parts that aren't so great. That's really interesting.
Well, I know everybody has their stuff, right? Everybody has
does.
their stuff.
Yeah.
That was just mine. I had an unusual and an unstable early life. And that led me to do certain things, and that's the best I can say.
And there are a countless amount of people that had it worse,
100%.
right? What do you think, Ryan?
I think I agree with what he said, and I think the thought of going back too far, of playing that what-if game, what if that could have changed? Oh, maybe I'd be the president today, or whatever. Like, it could be dangerous to go back too far and play it out too much.
Well, and it's such a good lesson, because if you can conquer that on a big effing deal, like how you were raised, then maybe you can conquer not making excuses or dealing with things on a smaller level within your personal business life, right? Is that kind of the connection there?
To a certain extent, it is. If you... it's really interesting. I do feel a lot of emotion, even just talking with you about it, talking with you guys about, I just feel how that feels. So it is everybody needs to be able to recognize that our ability to overcome is actually, well, I think it's limitless. And most of overcoming is nothing more than a decision of what we choose to focus on. So,
Well, and you get that through, say, somebody who's armless and legless, but yet they decide to climb a mountain.
right?
Or, I mean, somebody's going to look at that and go, but how? And they do.
Right.
And it's an absolute mindset, I think.
Ryan, I so totally agree with those things, because it's just, we would look at things we as people, or each individual, we will look at something in front of us and say, oh, I could never do that. And then literally somebody who is so physically disabled, comparatively, I should say, with every disadvantage, does that. And then we'd have to honestly look ourselves in the mirror and say, what's my problem? And it's the decision of, I could never do that.
The best part of watching the Ironman triathlon is they do all the stories of, the people that have, that they're with one leg, or, they just overcame cancer, but they were still, as they were going through cancer treatments, they're still training for the Ironman and what they've overcome. And you're sitting on the couch going, oh, like,
What time's dinner?
Yeah, right? It's like, I'm kind of hungry.
like, why can't I?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, to share the other side of that, since we were sharing of my life, there's a picture of my boy.
Yeah, let me go to screen capture.
Is that
here.
one of the ones you sent me? I have them up here in the tabs, Ryan.
Yeah.
I tabbed
Yeah.
them.
So that's my boy.
So
That's my daughter, obviously.
Awesome.
But that's my boy in the middle. And so
Russell Wilson fan.
actually, I think it's...
Is it a 13?
I think it's a 13,
Yeah, that's a
and it
13.
says asphalt and 13 on it.
Oh, okay.
But where I was going with that is in the latter years, I understood that my father's treatment of me was a pattern that had also been done to him, but by his mother. And so it was his mother that was violent to him. So he learned how to love me through violence. And so when my boy came, my definition of success, when I said there's a multitude of things, this is actually very difficult for me. There's a multitude of things that I could impart or do that would say I was a worthy dad for my boy. But I said I will not lay my hands on him in anger. Ever. And I've told him now, as he's approaching 17 years old, and we've had a little kerfuffle, that I've told him, I know you're really pissed at me, but for me, I couldn't be happier, because I've never hit you in anger, and a chain has been broken here, and the sins of the father run deep, right?
Sure.
So for me, that was part of the success, that I feel like my boy has not grown up in that environment, and therefore his boy or daughter will not grow up in that environment. So it was just out of something very difficult for me with my son, was very beautiful to say that I will never put my hands on him, even though as a dad definitely wanted to, right?
Yeah.
But never has that been our condition. It's not our story. So, and I'm extraordinarily happy about that.
I mean, I think that is, I never thought about it that way, but that's a huge success. And
I'm good with it.
It's an extremely personal thing for people, but I know lots of people that have made life decisions based off of how they were raised, or people they were raised around, that they weren't going to pass that element of their personality on. Yeah, I mean,
That part's cool.
you also aren't a drinker, correct?
Correct.
And I'm sure, I don't know when you made that decision, or when did you make that decision?
October will be 28 years ago. It
Okay.
was,
So you made it before your son was born.
correct.
So he got to see his dad grow up as not ever drinking.
Correct.
And that's probably a bigger profound effect than any physical, right? I mean, to a point, I guess I shouldn't say that. But when I grew up, I never saw my parents drink a lot. Maybe my mom would have a glass of wine with dinner once in a while, but never saw my parents drunk, never was around
Right.
that. Until I was out of the house and I actually saw my dad drink a margarita and realized that
Wow.
to raise their kids where they weren't going to be doing that.
I want to say to everybody, you and everybody else, full disclosure, I am not a judgmental non-drinker. I mean, I lost that battle at 27. I started out at 13, and I got 14 frickin' good years. So I had to quit. And so my children have never, my wife has never seen me drink.
Wow.
So, my children have never seen that. There's been we have we had a graduation party for my daughter this spring, so we had to buy some beer. Otherwise, people wouldn't come. So we still have some. And my father-in-law enjoys a little PBR every now and then. So we got a little PBR in the fridge, too, for when Granddad comes by.
Well, him and I would get along great.
There you go, right?
So let me just point out a couple things about this picture.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go back to it here.
Where are you at here?
Me?
Where's this picture taken?
Oh, that's one of the greatest things
He's
ever.
like, I'm on the left there, Cody.
Yeah, I was going to
We'll
say.
come back to your career. I just want to know about this fishing
That
thing.
is actually the falls of the Willamette River right at Oregon City.
Oh, nice.
So this is one of the most extraordinary fisheries, and it's right here.
Yeah.
And it's so, literally this was 10 minutes from my house, and run down the river. Hat tip to my friends at Watertime Outfitters, and Rob Crandall and his crew were actually fishing, in this case with a guy named Todd Retman. Extraordinary group of guys to get together and get you out on the water. And in this case with my kids, we're fly fishing for shad. And so this is very simple fly fishing in that, these are sinking flies. So it's just let the line out. And in this fishery, there are hundreds of thousands of fish right there beneath the falls, and they can't go any further. So they just hang out and they spawn. And so, we got tired of counting after a while. This was 4 hours on the river that, I would say if we stretched it into a fishing story, it was probably 60 fish, but maybe it was 50. But this photo is the rare and much coveted triple hookup. So we rehearsed this. The guide, Todd, had said, listen, good chance we're going to get a triple. And so when we do, here's what I need you guys to do so we can get the picture. So we literally had to rehearse it. And we had so many doubles that it just became a yawn. But this was and the fish, it's such a nice fishery as well. These fish are not torn up or damaged. I love to fish, and I love a well-managed fishery. And in this case, this was a lot of fun. And it's really interesting just to be in that spot that's right here in urban Portland. But a lot of people don't know that is the second largest waterfall in North America. That, behind only Niagara, that waterfall and that particular piece of geography is extraordinary.
Wow,
And you
I
can
didn't know
literally
that.
boat right up to it.
That's awesome.
Fascinating deal. So that was, my daughter was probably the hero of the day. She was yanking them in left and right. And, I did the dad role and would just let them get their lines out and then let mine drift right into theirs, yank, and take one right out from underneath them. So,
Well, good.
yeah, anyway. I appreciate you guys putting that out.
And now you have some sturgeon bait.
Right. And I didn't know that they would do this, but sturgeon were rolling all around us.
Yeah.
And I mean,
I believe it.
pigs just come to the surface and roll. And I mean, it's like an alligator
Yeah.
when they do it. And some of them jump clear and out of the water.
That's wild.
And sometimes 4 and 5 blue heron right around you.
And those sturgeon are dinosaurs.
Yeah.
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 All right, so you still haven't answered my original question. What's going on now? So we're into May. What are you doing?
I love that. And there are several different sentences and even song lyrics and stuff like that I would say, but I came back to the heart of the matter, which is I am very passionate to teach, to train, to coach. And in the Renaissance or the rebrand, when we were here, we talked about making better happen and that entity, and that still exists, but I rebranded and I made it my own in that I created more of myself in that brand just because people didn't really know my brand, they just knew me, and they knew my story, and they knew my willingness. So what I do today, and unfortunately I have a squatter. This is another reason I tell people I understand your pain. I have a squatter on my domain. That's actually on, I want my name, and I have a squatter on .com. So
So TomGriffith.com, there's someone sitting on it.
correct, and
Wants
has
100
been
yeah.
for many years. So they
Is
know
he
I
using
want
it, or
No.
he just wants to sell it?
No, they just want me to pay extortion
Yeah.
for it.
I'm doing it.
You're extorting?
Yeah. I have iPhonesunglasses.com. Because when the new iPhone came out, it was a face recognition, and not all sunglasses work with the face recognition. So nobody's made me an offer yet.
Well, I personally own a multitude of domains, probably 300, and when I get a worthy offer, I sell them. Well, I've offered this person at one point $6,000 for my name. Wouldn't budge. So long and short of that is, domain is tomgriffith.me.
I like that better.
Well, I liked it because it's me. And somebody had my domain in social media, so I'm simply the Tom Griffith on Facebook and Instagram.
Well, you're
So
lucky to get that. That's awesome.
I couldn't believe it. So tomgriffith.me, and the story of tomgriffith.me is simply me in that coaching, and I do coaching in a couple of different ways, and training are a big part of my life. And I believe that, part of my purpose to speak is to tell the story of what's possible, and that I can fill strategy, content, tools, training behind that.
Well, and for the people that don't know you like we do, you just shared some very personal stuff, but you didn't. I mean, they may not know how successful you were in the mortgage industry, and how dominant you were at a certain time. So it's your coaching comes from two different aspects, right?
Correct. Yeah, and I appreciate the tee up, and sometimes I don't necessarily talk about that, or I don't by default come out guns blazing, but I do know what it is to build a large practice and a large, high volume origination practice or sales team. I mean, I've again, I mentioned her before in our meeting today, but I've spent a lot of time in the last several months just talking to my wife as somebody who knows me, so that I can get a reflection. And, I even asked her in this process, I said, who am I to you? Who am I that you would say, this is you? And she says, well, Tom, you're a sales guy. I mean, you sell everything. You walk around persuading people to your point of view. And sometimes it's really cool, and sometimes it's obnoxious as hell. But you're a sales guy. And I realized as I got this feedback from all these people that you should speak, and I feel like, and you should sell. Everyone needs to sell. And I mean selling in the way of persuading, whether it's, you need a mate, you need a hookup, you need supplies, you need booze, you need a message from the pulpit, or you need to convince a prospect to do something. That's all persuasion, and so I've realized that that's my deal. I believe that my purpose in teaching selling is nothing more than the recognition that I've probably shared on this podcast, that I would say sales is just gaining their confidence and taking their money. And that's a little harsh for a lot of people, but I grew up in a harsh sales environment, extraordinarily aggressive, put on Glengarry Glen Ross, that, that kind of deal. But I think today more than ever, sales is nothing more than convincing someone to make a decision to do something that adds value to their life. That's all that sales is. And if we can't with good conscience do that, then we're in the wrong business. But that's my business, is to convince someone, people, make a decision to do something because you can't stay the same. And the only reason you would do anything is that it adds value to your life. That's why we're here in the sales game.
We like to call it helping.
That works.
Yeah, and that position is so important.
I agree.
Because people often won't come to that conclusion on their own, me included.
Most people are very fearful. They're afraid of being wrong. They're afraid of making the wrong decision. They're afraid of judgment. They have shame. People just have stuff.
Yeah, and they're comfortable.
Yeah, well, sometimes they're comfortable with the difficulty, right? The devil that you know is better than the devil that you don't. But so I'm a sales guy. 40 years down the road, that's still my life. I love actually, and I get such a, you've had Patrick Stone with WFG on the podcast.
Yeah. recently.
And I know Pat well enough that I admire him a great deal. But one of those things he said that I still love, and maybe you guys caught it or you didn't, but he said, I make a sales call every day.
Every day.
And that's, in business, that's all there is.
Well, I was shocked to hear him. Like, you're a CEO. What do you mean you're making sales calls? And he explained.
And he's probably one of the best people to make that call. Because just, like, honestly, if you're a prospect with a company and a very authentic, candid leader who even maybe says, I'm the CEO, calls you up and says, Cody, how can I help you make a decision to do some business with us? Let's just figure out if that's right. You know, that's my role. I mean, sure, CEO, I report to the board. I'm in charge of blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, let's gain their confidence and take their money. Let's make another deal.
Yeah.
You know, and I love that about that guy, and that's very, very true for him. So much of his personal talk, you know, I wake up broke every day. I very much resonate, you know, with that there's still some excitement. When I find a heartbeat in a deal, I just get excited. It's just like, ooh, something on right here.
Yeah, and I mean, and Ryan and I'm going to speak for Ryan a little bit. I mean, we're feeling a whole new level of emotion or enthusiasm and motivation with the career change we've made recently, switching companies. But I look at us and I'm like, man, we have a fire lit. Let's recognize this fire and ride it. And yeah, and the whole, like, Doug Mendenhall,
Yeah.
you know, who's our first guest. I think about that. What he said every day is, you know, people want to buy, they don't want to be sold, and helping, not selling.
Yeah.
And then when you add the level of selling yourself as a coach, it's a whole nother ball game. Right.
Yeah, for me, coaching is helping people become confident about their future. You know, most people are not confident anymore.
So are you staying in the real estate industry with this new coaching venture?
I do, to a certain extent, and it's because of part of the conversation or part of the problem I see right now is the industry itself is having an existential moment. And I'm fully committed to a distributed sales force. And I mean that as opposed to technology. Technology will get a portion of the business. Already has. The crossroads is upon us all, where to a certain extent, and actually to a large extent, somebody could wake up one day and say, I think I'll sell my house. And they can push a button, pull some pictures down that exist online, post them, post a price. Somebody says, I want to buy a house. Same deal. Log in, push a button, look at inventory, compare in excruciating detail now. You want a loan? Push a button. You know, that's what we're led to believe. And I think the myth, and therefore the opportunity, is that that will be the only way one day. I don't believe that's true. I believe it'll only work in certain situations. But that part of the business, I think, is already existent and means, therefore, distributed salespeople will have to adjust. It's going to impact their business. Technology will take a component that we have away. But I think all those other things that we've been talking about in human nature right now, we have to get better at relationships. If we're going to be committed to a distributed sales model, meaning belly button to belly button sales, we have to get back to that. And that's part of the, I utilize a lot of data from the NAR that actually proves the case as to why that is. And as I talk to real estate agents and loan officers, and even, I mean, I used to travel and had the privilege of sharing the stage with Pat Stone with his clientele to talk about the same thing. The opportunity today exists to do extraordinarily well, even in the presence of technology. The irony is, you can't do that on technology. You have to do it as a real person. And we've frankly lost the skills. So a lot of my coaching and training is back to the heart of the matter of how do we, I'm looking for the black thing, but how do we just pick this up and talk to someone again. Because by their own admission, most clients say, my preferred means of communication within the transaction is this. Yet, everyone's mindset is to move them to book Graham pin twit. and nobody really wants to be communicated with there. Yet, the industry, for the last 10 years, we've tried to figure that out, and it's not working well.
Yeah.
So I have people in my practice that are not in that particular industry, but a lot of my outreach has just been this context of, listen, if you're a real estate agent or you're a loan officer, and you want to increase your impact or increase your business, it's actually very simple, but we have to get clear. So I've been helping people get fit. I've been talking a lot about agent fitness, lender fitness in the context, and I mean, Ryan and I go back years and years and years talking about push-ups. But, when you start out on a push-up regimen, you're not going to throw down and do 25. And my story was, when I started, I had to do them on the wall, right? You got to start till you can go down to the table, and you go down to the coffee table, you go down to the floor until you can get there. And so in getting all of us back to this relevant relationship-based selling, we gotta get fit to start calling people on the phone again. And so that's why a lot of people in my practice are still in the real estate business, whether it's the loan or agent side, because it's just an area, and it's part of my testimony. When somebody says, well, what have you done? And I can tell them 800 plus loans my last 2 years. How's that work? And so building a team and all that stuff is relevant. I've never taught chiropractors how to do chiropractic. That's not my area. But I do know how to help a chiropractor that says, I'm not feeling really good about my prospects. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, I can help you. I exist. The organization exists to help you feel confident about your future.
So we've been talking with a lot of coaches over the last few months. And would you say that your coaching is niche? Because I've had coaches that are more consultants. Like, all right, how many people are in your database? How many real estate agents are you working with? XYZ, very mechanical. And when I was going through coaching with that coach, that is exactly what I needed. I didn't need someone to make me feel better, motivate me, and I was good there. But then it sounds like yours is almost more of a niche coaching. And right now I'm working with a coach that's more of an emotional coach too, less consulting, less mechanical.
For me, the niche, I love it that you would say that, by the way. 40 years, I never got to finish this story, but 40 years to me just means there's no surprises here. Doesn't mean I know anything anymore. I know a lot of people know way more than me. All I know is when I engage with an individual, 40 years means no surprises. And if I was to just articulate the secret sauce there, is it won't take me too long to discover what you're resisting. And to me, coaching, you're right, there's simple mechanics that literally work every time, right? It's like, make these calls. They work every time. But people don't do it.
Yeah.
And my old mentor, or the guy that probably had the most influence on me, was Jim Rohn. And we talked about this before. But his statement to me that was so profound said, a few things will make most of the difference. And they're actually easy to do. The problem is, they're easy not to. Right? And that was his quote, that one of a handful of landslides. The niche for me is to help people stop with delusion, denial, excuses, because the mechanics of sales works. And I'm more convinced than ever. It works even better now than it ever did, because frankly, the bar is so low, most people in the business right now are aggressively tunneling under it. I mean, that's just so lazy anymore. And I'm sorry, I've really got my pulpit is out right now.
No, you just pissed me off at myself. Because you're absolutely right, and I'm going to let you be on your pulpit, but I want to we'll use me as an example, okay? So when I went to your Making Better Happen seminar, which
Yes.
people still talk about, my referral partners I brought,
I love that. Thank you.
My takeaway was I'm going to pick up the phone and call people on their birthday. Well, I got a birthday reminder yesterday through my fancy CRM. I did all the work to make sure they're in there.
Right.
And then I got one today, and I didn't call either one because I'm like, I don't know if they're going to remember me.
We should call them both live right now and just see how it works.
Yeah. Well, maybe Ryan has some calls to make.
No, but I love your testimony
Yeah.
to that. It's so easy to do it, and it's just as easy not to.
Yeah, and I've been
so-
through all the coaching. And, I have no excuses, right?
And I feel like at some point, we need to figure out what are we resisting. For me, and I'll share the double negative, and I'm saying this as a disclaimer to everyone listening who has an English degree, but the only way I can say this is with a double negative, and we're never supposed to use those in grammar. But we have to make whatever we're trying to do so simple, we can't not do it. You know, it's almost as elemental as breathing. You can't not do that. As a matter of fact, it's a reflex. Your heart beating, you can't not do it. Try and stop your heart. You can't.
I'd like to hear George Bush Sr. say that.
I can't not do it.
Can't not do it.
Right? Wouldn't be prudent this juncture.
That's good, Tom. It's really good.
Can't. So we need to make our birthday calls. And for me, part of the question in 40 years, no surprises, it just means that you're resisting. And what is it that you're resisting? Because at the moment we start to lay down resistance, Cody, so much of the Kool-Aid to me was, I need to do business with my dead dad. So what am I resisting? What is it that I will not lay down in the moment, right? And so for me, sometimes that's part of the extraordinary nature of the coaching for me is it's very easy to say, you need to make your calls. Let's just say that's a topic. You need to make your calls. And you say, okay, I will, and 2 or 3, 4 times go by, and you haven't. And it's easy for me to say, 40 years, no surprises, bro. There's just something in there. And maybe it's as simple as you got to fix your calendar, you need to fix your phone, you need to fix your email, you may need to fix your relationship with your mama. You know, and it's my ability to reach into somebody's lives in a very... This only comes from feedback, by the way. I didn't set out to say, this is what I'm going to do. But I hear people tell me, it's like you spoke directly to me. And in that moment, I got it. And I was willing to simply start. And I feel like I want to help everybody eliminate the block to making a human connection. And so the calls work every time.
Well, I think it's very profound what you just said, and I'm not trying to paint you into a niche corner, but there's definitely different types of coaching, right? And I think the majority of people, here's a good example. One question I've asked a lot of people, I used to ask it every time, was I went on an accountability kick for a couple years, right?
Right.
Where I realized that I needed a lot of accountability.
Sure.
For goals, non-negotiable daily tasks, those type of things. And as I would sit down with people that have achieved a large level or high level of success, I would ask them, are you somebody that needs accountability? And some people said yes, but there were some that said, I'm a pretty self-accountable person, right? So there's some coaching programs that I've been observing both sides of. I've eavesdropped at a seminar. I eavesdropped on a coach who was doing a coaching call, right? So I got to listen to that side, and it was very accountable, very, like you said, did you make your calls? Why not? It was very bullet point, high pressure. There's another coaching program out there that's we've have a lot of friends have had a lot of success with, that's very structured, very aggressive, not very emotional. And then you have kind of the consulting side that's a little more emotional. Then you have more of a life coach, right? And for me, I like somewhere between that consultant and life coach, somewhere in there, where that rigid XYZ, did you do it, yes or no, talk to you next week, doesn't really work for me. But somewhere between that consulting coach and that life coach.
I think that for me, what's valuable about what you just said is I believe you will make your calls when you are compelled, meaning when you say, I can't not do it. And the thing that's missing for most people is that rigorous, structured environment of literally somebody's foot in your ass that says, make your calls. You're never going to do that unless you can emotionally connect to the purpose, the thing you want by making those calls. And until you make that connection to literally where you can't not do it, right? That I am resolved that I will make these calls because they get me the thing I want, whatever that is. That's where in consultancy, in training is different, that's skill transference, but in coaching, even masterminding, I want to move people to identify what is it you want. Just be clear. You want. Don't say you shouldn't want. You always want. We all want. What is it? Why is that important? Can you defend that? Just as I mean, I've heard you ask other people here, why do you do what you do? And I think that's such a valuable question. What's even more valuable is your answer when you hear it with your own words, that you say, I do want that. Mm-hmm. I really do want that. And that will drive you to start to do other simple things. Now, for you and for all of the listeners, I would say that's the success secret is to actually at that point make a small addition, not an elimination.
An addition of what?
A behavior, a conversation. Well, I believe there's only 3 things we can work on. The things we say, the things we think, and the things we do. So meaning mindset, conversations, actions. Insert a small action. Insert a small conversation. And in this case, I mean a conversation you may have with yourself that you believe. So,
is my goal from doing this to get to whatever task I know I need to do to get to the point where I can't not do it?
correct. To just find a way that you started. The starting is the most important part. So you can't eliminate your way, in my opinion. Addictive personality too, by the way, but in my opinion, no surprises in 40 years. Very few people will succeed in elimination because there's actually that old part of our brain that screams at us in elimination, that reticular cortex. So when you start saying, no ice cream, no ice cream, no ice cream, no ice cream, there's ice cream frickin' everywhere because that's all your brain is thinking about. So the goal for me is let's find a small insertion. Just add one thing, green beans. Just, I'm adding green beans.
Can you talk, using that analogy, can you talk about,
Ooh, sorry, fellas.
can you talk a little bit about how if someone has a non-negotiable thing they know they need to do on a daily basis or routine, it almost feels like sometimes my subconscious is looking for things to distract me from doing that I can say are important. Like if I have to make my birthday calls, just because I said I skipped those 2. Well, I may say, oh, I need to go talk to this person or train this new person I had, or do something that find distractions, find things that feel like work that are more important. Is that kind of a similar to what you're talking about with the green beans and ice cream?
To a certain extent it is, and I can easily make the connection here, but where I'd want to actually elaborate what
Because it still feels like work.
Right. And it's still difficult for one reason, and that is you have fear. In some part of that, there's an analysis for you to do to say, what am I afraid of? And if I was to, again, just say, let's name lots of people and not make you say it, it's going to come down to a fear of rejection. That, oh, if I make this call, they might reject me. So why would that be the belief? Well, I've been taught that I have to make this call and I have to say it in a certain way, and nobody actually likes that call, so I'm really hesitant to make it.
So can it just be me being lazy?
Well, I mean, potentially, but I would say why, even for the exercise, why are you lazy? Why does one find themselves saying, I'm just lazy. I just didn't do it.
Yeah.
And maybe there are people, I would have to tell you, Cody, in that case, I don't know, I don't identify with that. That's not one of my, to use the modern word, it's not one of my pronouns, right? I can't spell lazy. But I also believe lazy people are actually just resisting the clear admission of the obvious truth because it's easier.
I'm sitting over here.
Can you? I'm sorry, Ryan.
Yeah.
Just I don't want you to lose your thought. Can you say that again?
They're lazy
Yeah.
uh,
Because.
of the clear admission of the obvious truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, that's the basis for all change.
Say it one more time.
The clear admission of the obvious truth.
So they're lazy because they're afraid to admit the honest truth.
They're lazy because one time they extended themselves and it didn't work out the way they thought, and they began to articulate a pattern of conversation within their head that they quickly reaffirmed: failure, 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 judgment, shame, etc. And now, in order to assuage that pain, they've withdrawn from any sort of engagement again. They'd say, oh, I'm just lazy. As a species, we aren't lazy. So it's a pattern of belief that leads to lazy. And so I believe that's where it's come from most of the time, that we have extended ourselves and it didn't work out.
So even thinking that you're being lazy is an excuse within itself.
The conversation of saying I am lazy, I think there's a really quick analysis somebody could do there with the help of a guide or a coach to just question if that's true or not. You know, that is that true? And there's just a pattern of questioning that we could run through that ultimately would lead to you saying, no, the opposite is true. So actually, I just believe I'm lazy, and I can change that belief, in the moment.
Thanks for explaining that. Sorry, Ryan.
I'm sitting over here putting this into terms of sports and physical well-being. The athletic side is it's been my whole life. And so I'm thinking like Biggest Loser. What always happens on that show? So you said 3 things happen: what you say, what you do, and I think most importantly, what you think.
Right, mindset.
And what happens every single time on that show is, why are they heavy? Well, they're heavy because something's holding them back in their head. Mm-hmm. And what you just talked about, not willing to state what the obvious might be, they always get to that point where they have that breakthrough moment because my dad was bad to me when I was younger, or my wife died, or whatever the situation might be. So what you think, getting past that, giving yourself a really small goal. I was talking with a real estate agent yesterday, and they asked me a question, and I said, how about just let's give yourself one small goal. Next Wednesday from 8:30 to 11:30, say you're going to do whatever your top 3 priorities are, get them done. Non-negotiable. Don't say you're going to do something 5 days a week for 10 hours a day. Start real small. Give yourself just a little hurdle and get over it. Get some success under your belt, and then keep driving forward.
That is the articulation of one of the most basic statements for me, that you have to make whatever it is you're trying to do so simple, meaning so small,
that you can't fail.
You can't not do it.
Yeah.
And we have to build. Guys, we all know this. Everybody listening knows this. So I'm just going to out it. We are all really uncomfortable in society right now, right? We are seeing our American physical condition being ravaged by big pharma, big agri, big medicine. And I mean, I'm a patriot and a flag waver, just like I was when I was here before. But there is a system that's operating right now that's keeping us very unhealthy, mentally, physically, emotionally. It's just stacked against us. But we can overcome those things by just challenging our beliefs. I wish my wife was here so I could quit referring to my wife in the third person. But I was just talking with my wife over the weekend. I have spent so much time in self-evaluation, and that self-evaluation for me is nothing more than the question of, is that absolutely true? Right? Whatever it is, state your belief, and then ask yourself, is that absolutely true? And you can very quickly, in 3 or 4 more questions after that, very quickly turn that around into, well, that's not absolutely true at all. the opposite might be as true or truer.
But is that a skill that takes time to be able to do, to be able to ask yourself that same question?
Oh yeah, you have to be able. I
Right.
mean, you have to be comfortable, meaning you got to start, and you need a guide. And I mean, I had a helper until I realized I can do this myself. You know, I can evaluate and ask, and then help other people evaluate and ask, and help them simply start and fail and continue to break it down to where they start or to where they build momentum on successes. So simple. I can't not do it.
We talked about it last time when you were coaching me, and I said, we started talking about athletics, and you said, oh, I need to do such and such. And I said, Tom, you don't need to do 50 push-ups.
Right.
Start with 5 push-ups. And so the very next week I was like, did you do your 5 push-ups? And you're like, I did do my 5 push-ups. And I'm sure 5 turned to 10 and 10 turned to 15. But it was that small starting point of, you're not just going to start out doing 100 push-ups. You're going to build your way into it.
Well, I'm sure that discipline followed you through your journey through Taekwondo, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So those small baby steps you made then, I'm sure you had to make small baby steps again, so it just kind of repeats itself.
And at this point, that's all that happens for me is small baby steps. One thing that has changed for me is that I realize now the power of time and compounding. And so I have much less fear to start on the tiniest grain of change because I know today 1 grain, tomorrow 2. Well, that's actually a huge change, and the next day 4. So I realize now at least one of those things in my life is the power of compounding, and time is on our side. Our society is still at quicker, faster, longer, quicker, faster, longer, you know, and so we're being destroyed by that. So I really, anything I start anymore, like I have recently agreed with myself and with my wife to run a bit. And since the last time I ran, I am significantly older, 1 knee surgery under my belt. And all I'm saying about the knee surgery was that I had a belief that it would be harder. You know, that I thought, well, geez, 55-year-old guy got a knee surgery, that's going to suck. It's actually not the knee that hurts. Right now when I run, it doesn't hurt. But I had to start so simply. And as a guy that, in the height of my productive career as a sales guy, I ran 25 miles a week. I wasn't a big runner, but I would just go out the back door of my practice and I ran, you know, and it was easy, 25 miles a week. And so you still think, oh, I can just go do that, except I could barely run 100 yards. You know, the vital energy had changed. But, you know, I went out and ran a 5K with my wife the other night. You know, in our current condition here in the Northwest, it's 8:30 in the evening, it's 83 degrees, and I'm dying, but I knocked out a 5K.
Oh,
And so I feel like, all right, I'm on my way back, right? And that was an all-out effort. I'm still sore. So anyway.
So you said you had a story about our last podcast you wanted to share.
Yes. So here's the power of relationship selling. And one of the testimonies that I want to, or the reason I want to share this testimony is I believe the average salesperson already knows everybody they need to know. And so as that contrarian teacher, I will tell people all the time, stop trying to harvest new leads. You're wasting your time. Instead, you know everyone you need to know. And I received an out of the blue, so last week, out of the blue, contact with a guy I hadn't talked to probably a year and a half. By the way, different coast. I mean, he's in New Jersey. Didn't know why he was reaching out. I knew that around about the same time in the spring, his organization was going through a change and he was doing something different. And I figured, and I just get this, hey, was thinking about you, want to catch up? Sure. So we catch up on Monday. And I quickly asked him, what's the genesis for this? And he said, you know, I was watching a podcast. And you were on it. And he goes, I can't remember the name of it. I said,
Whose podcast was it?
The Hunt for Success. He was watching the Hunt for Success podcast. And he said, oh my gosh, I realized that I had to reach out to you. And here's the story of that. He said, what are you doing? And I told him the Renaissance, the back to the heart of the matter, that I am now beginning to leverage myself in this very clear and deliberate direction. And I've built strategy, content, tools, and training. And he said, so you want some help? You know, that, and this was an entree into an opportunity I was looking for. But what I wanted you guys to know, it's because of the podcast. And somehow, right, who knows, however, he found the podcast. And that was a relationship through another person, right? You already know everyone you need to know. And as soon as you're willing to engage with your circle of people and simply tell the story of what you're doing, it's just like making your calls. It works every time. And I just wanted you guys to know that I had a Hunt for Success podcast connection.
Nice.
That and now we've got another call next week where we're going to talk about the bringing the band back together and the JV that will explode the whole thing into change. So thanks for that.
Well, you're right, and I'm kind of a hypocrite in some ways because it's, this podcast is fun. It's a fun thing to work on.
Yeah.
It's more fun than work,
Yeah.
right? So there's days where we just pick up the phone, make power calls, but you're right. And I tell people this all the time, and maybe I should be telling myself, is people ask, well, how do you get all these people on your podcast? And my response is, if you just slow down enough to get to know the people that are around you, you know some pretty extraordinary people,
Right?
right?
6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, whatever it was. I mean, I'm pretty sure we could get George Bush on the phone
Yes.
between the three of us. So
Yeah.
at this juncture.
I sent Todd Duncan a text, about 6 months ago, and because I was watching the news and I saw Bill McDermott was on on Air Force One with Donald Trump. Or no, that wasn't it.
He was on a panel of sorts.
He was on a panel.
Yeah.
He was sitting next to Donald Trump on this panel. I can't remember what it was, but I know Todd Duncan. Todd Duncan knows Bill McDermott. And I seen Bill McDermott speak, and then now Bill McDermott knows Donald Trump. So I sent Todd a text. I said, "I am 4 degrees away from the president, thanks to you."
Right.
And I didn't think he would respond, and he responded. He goes, "Oh, you must be watching the news." He was on his jet watching the news, and so here I am texting, and I'm like, "This is so awesome," and it's just because I took a chance to get to know the people and overcame some of my fears of talking with people that are they're heroes of mine, right? So, yeah.
It's really cool. I mean, when you think about it, and partly to maybe bring the next chapter of the evolution for me is that I've had a huge passion to help people overcome their debilitating struggles, right? And just get what they want. I mean, I've broken coaching and personal development down in my mind to everybody wants something. I want to help them get it. I don't believe that philosophically, I don't believe that we were sent here to suffer. I'm not one of those people. I believe we were sent here to thrive and be happy. So, in that's just what I've chosen to identify with because, frankly, for me, the other choices are just too painful. So I believe we're here to thrive and be happy. And so I just want to help people get that. But where I was going in the ramble there is that now one of the things I'm most excited about is we've talked about different things done in business, and oftentimes business is very, your ideology is just, I got to hit a goal, and it can be income, and it can be all those things. But I began to also pay attention to or think about impact. How do you leave a mark? Steve Jobs' comment was, leave your dent in the world, right? That was, and I could never steal that, although I thought it was the best, when he countered somebody with, that's really cool, but how are you going to make a dent in the world? And then I just thought that impact really matters to me, and who am I to make an impact and all of those things. Yet the testimony is I got really clear about teaching, training, coaching. I had a lot of really good people come to me and say, can you help me do that? And I realized that's impact, that fulfilled an impact for me where I think coaching is esteemed in the world. People say, I need a perspective, I need some help. And I think a lot of people are actually very helping. They want to help, they want to coach. But in the application of that, it's very hard to start, right? No, you don't have strategy, you don't have content, you don't have tools, you can't even be legitimate. How are you going to take money? I mean, just all that stuff. And that's all part of what I had. And, the story and the content and the tools I was able to quickly put together in my mind, and then in a mind map, which is my form of on paper, but I was able to put together what is this program of helping people succeed in that, if that's what they want to do. So that's a new area for me that's part of the evolution. That's, while I've sat with you guys and we've talked about my work very individualistic, at this point, this next 20 years is me empowering other people to do what they want to do. That's part of I can share my story, and I think I shared with you guys the Everest story, right? That I climbed, I did that metaphor in my business in 2006. I climbed, and I had guides and helpers and all that stuff, but I was very unfulfilled. Mm-hmm. But I loved the mountain. I loved the climb, I loved the view, and I've known all along I will help other people climb. But I don't need to go to the top anymore. I'm going to equip and educate and train and get them going, but that summit part, that last little bit, that can be a bitch. And mm-hmm. I'm just, they call that the dead zone on that mountain for a reason. And I'm not going to go there anymore, but I do want to watch people climb. And so I'm actually really excited about the evolution of 40 years, no surprises, is also now equipping people to do this type of impact. And I felt like in coming here today, that was one of those things I wanted to share with you guys, that's the next evolution since I was here before. That because organically, to me and a lot of people, but it's really a handful of people, came to me and said, what does it take? How could you do that? How does your nature get translated to me and to other people? How do we do that? So I'm excited about that.
I just want to say your first dent is going to be your family.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Thanks.
That's the first dent, breaking the cycle, if you will,
mm-hmm.
And just being good people. That's in a big part how we make our dent in the world, just by being a good person.
Yeah.
And then now you're paying it forward in other respects as well.
I feel like it's I appreciate you saying that very much. It's the mission field to me. I feel like we are surrounded with opportunities to make better happen. People are dying to be happier right now.
And hopefully the people you have that impact on take a portion of that and have an impact on other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a poster on my wall, poster board, from a presentation I did with my old coach. And on there it says live a life of impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it every day. And I never really truly thought about what it meant till you said something similar just now. I started talking about making a dent and having a life of impact. And that's a big responsibility that we all should have, right?
Yep.
From having a life of impact with your kid, breaking that cycle, having a life of impact with our friends and family, away from social media, getting down, sitting down and connecting, all the way to impacting someone's business and taking them up that journey of Everest. But
changing their life and their family's life.
Yeah. It's a very emotional thing, right? Having impact on somebody.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
It's very frightening, but that's like,
Well,
that's the old Manfred Mann song, I think. It's like, Mama always said not to look into the eyes of the sun, but that's where the fun is. That impact is where, to me, that's the reason I get out of bed. When people say to me, man, I just didn't think I could do that.
And you never know when today's going to be your last day.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a big impact on me after we did our last podcast. I don't know if it's okay if I share that part of it, but I was really nervous because I was going to speak at Sales Mastery with my coach, and I was extremely nervous. And you're such a good speaker, and I asked for some advice. I said, well, actually what I asked is it okay if I call you sometime to get a couple pointers? And you said, let's do it right now. And that was a huge impact on me. But my coach, who I had gotten really close with at that point, so we had our podcast earlier that week. And that was the last time I ever spoke to my coach, was sitting on that couch over there right before you and I started that podcast. And then he was having a profound impact on my life at that point in my career. and this podcast. We would have never done this podcast if it wasn't for him. And I was scheduled to speak with him on that following Thursday. I think we did our podcast on a Friday. And then Sunday night, he was killed in the Las Vegas shooting. And then it was even harder to go on stage, right?
Right.
But I remember the things you said, and it really calmed me down. And I went on, did it, and I called you afterwards.
Right.
So that year at the event, they had an illustrator that did like a whiteboard illustration for all the speakers.
Mm.
Well, then he did one for me, for everybody, right? And so my presentation I did with Todd Duncan. It was more of an interview.
Sure.
And obviously it was extremely emotional
Oh, yeah.
for everybody there. And there were actually 2 people that were killed in the Las Vegas shooting that should have been there that day. It wasn't just my coach. And then Todd sent that to me. And on there, that illustrator wrote, "Live a life of impact."
Mm.
And so now that's up above my desk every day. But it's an easy thing. I look at it every day. I never really thought about what those words meant. But just kind of the theme of this podcast, unintentional theme, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and you never know when it's going to be over.
Never. It's always so sudden.
Yeah. And I can tell you that I'm one of thousands of people that Brian Fraser impacted.
Mm.
And I'm very, very fortunate just to have that time, the
Mhm.
short time I did with him. What are you going to say, Ryan?
I was just going to give you kudos for talking about that. I know it's been hard for you.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a lot harder for other people, right? And then
Right.
But I was somebody who told Jeff Strode I wasn't interested in ever going to sales mastery.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't interested in coaching. Didn't need it. And then slowly he got me to go one year, and then it's just been a slippery slope. And my business and my relationships have definitely reflected.
Right.
So for those who are listening that, this is the first step. This is my journey through personal development.
Right.
That's what this podcast is.
Ours.
Sorry,
We-
Goose.
we. Thank you.
Goose. So, yeah. So reach out to Tom. It's a great place to start or continue your coaching. TomGriffith.me.
Yep. Tom at tomgriffith.me. You can always find me there. Tom at tomgriffith.me.
Just pulling up your website here. So obviously this guy rocks, and just click that red button.
And there's some scrolling and different things that this is a work in progress. And here's what's really cool about that too. I did most all of that by myself, which to me has, by the way, a limiting belief I always had is I could never do that, and so nowadays you just buy software and drag crap around and type and it does it.
Well, and
So-
we're doing this podcast. We
Yeah.
started as complete noobs.
It's a great time to be alive.
It is.
That we have this kind of content. We're not stuck to certain channels or having to go read a book. I mean, anybody can put together a podcast or put together social media and have a life or live a life of impact, right?
Tom Griffith will have a podcast.
Yeah, when are you going to start your podcast?
I'm just going to go ahead and call that. I'm going to say within the next 2 to 3 years, there will be the Tom Griffith.
You can't not have your own podcast.
It's going to be called
Can't not do it.
Tom Griffith the Dent.
It's it actually already has a name.
I love it.
I already have. So this is great. Let me just out this publicly, right? Because this
Yeah.
will be really good for me. I believe that my purpose is to help people feel confident about their future. And sometimes, if you're like me, you need. And by the way, I'm introverted. I'm not an extrovert by any means. I tend to investigate in private. And I need to see the case for what I'm looking for or whatever. The podcast for me is the evidence of success. And I simply want to show people success in the simplest of ways that, one of those things that comes to my mind right now is I have an extraordinarily vivid memory of the success of my kids when at one night in the yard, all of us together, we were off with the training wheels. And that's one of those amazing little pieces of evidence. But so the podcast for me is the evidence of success. And I proved the concept when I could buy the URL, right? That was the proof of concept for me. So that's it for me as I can explain it right now. Is the evidence of success is nothing more than a forum for people to come and tell their story, so that someone may say, "Oh, that's like me, right? That's like me, and I can do that," because that's oftentimes how I want to encourage people to say, just look at me. I mean, if I can do this, you can do this, right? If I can do this, you can do it too. And that's been part of the evidential statement for me. So I'm actually going public right now that I will get that
I love it.
moving forward. And I've actually, my teaching studio, I do most of the teaching I do with a microphone like this and a little different camera deal, but I do that in a studio in my office, and I'm just like, let's just get the podcast rolling. But in reciprocity, you guys may need to come on the podcast too, so we're going to say that publicly as well. So you guys may have to be on my podcast.
We'd love to.
I'm all in.
As the evidence of success. So, with that said, I'm really excited to find the next 20 years as an opportunity, literally a limitless opportunity for people that want to make better happen in their lives, that literally want to find whatever you label that as, happiness, success, achievement, peace, whatever it is. And that's what I want to help people do today, because that's my journey. 40 years, no surprises.
Yeah. Well, glad to be your friend.
That's how I feel.
Glad for you to be a friend of the podcast. Always look forward to having you on in our conversations, and thanks for being a champion for us.
Oh, yeah.
And everything you do. All right. Hopefully, our next podcast will be on the side of the Yakima River.
Oh, yeah.
We're packing this up today. A couple weeks, we're going out to Yakima to fish, hopefully with Joe Roeder, who was on our podcast.
Yeah.
He's in Russia now. He's going to come back and then hopefully take us fishing, and a podcast on the side of the river with him and the ownership group of Red's Fly Fishing. So in the meantime, thanks again, Tom.
Thanks, Tom,
fellas.
for being here.
Certainly my pleasure. Really good to be together.
All right.
See you next time.
Yep.
Later.
Peace.